When I was in the detention center, I heard many stories of other women who didn't particularly identify as queer, but just being a woman in Mexico and in Central and South America, I realized even more how dangerous it is to be a woman in those parts.
Lulu Martinez is a well-known immigrant and LGBTQ rights activist who is in the process of getting asylum in the US. Her parents illegally brought her to the US when she was 3. A judge recently sided with her claim that as a vocal queer woman, her life might be in danger if she were deported to Mexico. But the government still has time to appeal that decision. It argues Martinez's fears are overblown because Mexico City legalized same-sex marriage in 2009.
Because I am an individual that doesn't have very strong ties or knowledge of what it means to live in Mexico, that already put me at risk. And my queer identity in Mexico, students and journalists and other individuals who are very outspoken are often repressed.
While Mexico is one of the leading countries in Latin America for LGBTQ legal rights, advocacy groups say the picture on the ground, especially in rural and religious areas, could be much worse. Also, the number of murdered women in Mexico has been rising sharply over the past decade, often in areas with important gang presence.
Do you think that other young undocumented immigrants who may not have such a claim may in a way be resentful?
I'm sure that that's going to be the case in some aspect, because truly it's also about luck. If anything, it should be more reason to connect with those individuals, to not fight these fights in an isolated manner.
In 2013, Martinez and 8 other undocumented immigrants got themselves intentionally arrested at the border as a form of protest. This was obviously a risky move for people living in fear of deportation. The group, known as the Dream 9, attempted to re-enter the US from Mexico without visas, and as a result were detained in a federal facility in Arizona. They wanted to witness firsthand what conditions were like for immigrants in detention, and they wanted to help other detainees in whatever way possible.
And there was an older woman that I met who showed me the scars on her legs, on her arms, because she had a partner who was very abusive in her country of origin. And so it was so hard to leave and to leave those women behind.
Martinez and another organizer spent 8 days in solitary confinement for reportedly inciting a protest. They led other women in the dinner hall to chant "undocumented and unafraid" and gave them the number of a legal hotline. After 15 days behind bars, the Dream 9 were released on parole until a judge would decide on their asylum claims.
By crossing the US-Mexico border, we were really trying to emphasize the fact that many families were being left out of those conversations and policy proposals.
Their protest was meant to pressure Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reforms that would go beyond the recently enacted Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Chicago Magazine named Martinez one of 6 Chicagoans of the Year in 2013 for her activism.
I definitely was not able to return to my everyday life coming back to Chicago. I think I was very depressed for a very long time. And I think that's also why I had to take a step back and realize there has to be so much more work done to be able to do justice to the people that we meet along the way.
In the footsteps of the Dream 9 came the Dream 30. 30 undocumented activists also turned themselves into border officers just a couple months after the Dream 9 were released. That group included Marcela Espinosa. She was illegally brought to the US when she was 6, grew up here in a Chicago neighborhood known as the Mexico of the Midwest, and then moved back to Mexico when she was 19. 10 years later, she decided to return to the US as part of the Dream 30.
Why did you want to move back to the US?
It's very hard, at least where I'm from in my state, and many other states in Mexico too. As you can see in Lulu's case, it's not easy to be a queer person or be a lesbian, particularly how I identify myself. It's very dangerous.
Espinosa spent a month in immigration detention in Texas before also being released on parole. While behind bars, she got some comfort knowing that another woman who had a lot in common with her had been through a similar experience.
So all of a sudden we started talking over the phone while I was detained in El Paso, and then things happened.
How did you guys transition to actually dating?
I came back and we just started to talk. I think one of the pieces that also just clicked for us were our cats. Like, it sounds funny, but Lulu has cats. And I had cats that I had left in Morelia, so I think that was one of the things that really resonated for both of us.
So it's not that you were both detained in the same conditions, that you were both hardline immigration activists. No, it's just that you both love cats.
Yeah.
that was the common element there.
Yeah, I think that was really great.
Espinosa's asylum hearing is set for 2021. In the meantime, she has to check in with the government yearly, knowing too well that her future in the US is very much in limbo.